Hello everybody, it is 3:30, which of course means it is time for one of our after-school STEM shows here at the Headwaters Science Center. I'm Ryan, one of the educators here, and so what these shows are every day at 3:30 we go live and talk about some kind of science-y topic with one of the educators we have here at the Science Center. So tune in different days, you'll probably see different educators talking about some different topics. And today you got me, and what we are going to be talking about is genetics. And we're going to be talking a little bit about something called a Punnett square, which some of you might be familiar with, some of you might not be, but we'll kind of explain what they are and how they work in a little bit here. But genetics is probably a term you've heard probably particularly me talk about in a bunch of these types of shows where I've mentioned it, but not, I guess, really ever explained what I mean when I say genetics. When I'll talk about like the genetic similarity of two types of animals is probably the context where it comes up the most. And what genetics are is the study of genes, and when I say genes, I mean G-E-N-E-S, not like the pants jeans. And genes are basically the way that information is passed on from parent to offspring. And so genes are what determine your hair color, your eye color, your skin color, your, the shape of your nose. All these things are determined by genes, and it's not just appearance things, it's all kinds of stuff that's going on with your body. But it's all stuff that you inherit from your parents. It's all what we would call genetic inherited things. And so this is true for anything that's living, anything that reproduces uses this kind of same mechanism for sending information onto their offspring as far as like how they're gonna look and be. And we have a couple of particularly interesting cases here at the Science Center that I thought I would highlight. I'm actually going to take my mask off because we got nobody here today and I'm vaccinated anyway. And so I think the first one we'll talk about is going to be Rosie. And Rosie is a common snapping turtle. I'll pull her out here and take a little peek at her. She's a little grumpy with me, so I scooped her out of her tank. And what's interesting about Rosie is that Rosie is what is called albino. And being albino, she has a condition called albinism. And what that means is that she doesn't produce any of the pigments that most snapping turtles produce. So pigments are the things that give color to eyes, hair, skin, etc. And she doesn't make those. So the fact that I have, brown hair on my beard is a product of pigments that she doesn't have. And albinism is a condition that is inherited from your parents. It's a genetic thing. And so what's interesting, though, is that it is what we would call recessive. Albinism is a recessive trait. And when we talk about recessive, and the other side of that is dominant, so a lot of traits will have a dominant version of it and a recessive version of it. And what that means is that if both genes are present in an individual, the dominant one is going to be the one that manifests. And what's really interesting about albinism in snapping turtles is that in the wild, and it's not 100% always true, but in the wild, generally albino snapping turtles are not going to survive to adulthood. It's very, very unlikely that one of Rosie's parents was a full albino like Rosie is. And what that means is that both of her parents must have probably been carriers for albinism. And what a carrier is a individual that has the gene present, but it's not being what we'd call expressed because the dominant gene is also present. And we're going to draw a quick Punnett square for that here to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. And so Punnett squares are a cool tool that helps visualize these types of things that I'm talking about. They're pretty quick, pretty easy thing to draw. Start out, as you can imagine, with a square, or something resembling a square, I suppose. Put a little cross in the middle and you make those potential traits. So in this case, we'll say that a capital P represents normal pigmentation, and her male parent would have to have one capital P, normal pigmentation, one lowercase a, which is albinism, and then her mother would also have to have that same thing. And then what you would get is, in a given allotment of a given baby is going to get one of these, and it's kind of just a random dice roll from this point. And so if you're this baby, you got a capital P and a capital P, you are having the standard normal pigmentation, and also you're not carrying albinism. If you're this baby, you get a capital P and a lowercase a, that means you have the normal pigmentation, but you are carrying albinism, so you could potentially pass albinism on to your offspring. Same thing here, where you're getting a P up here and an A down here. So these are functionally the same, even though you're getting them from opposite parents. And then way in the corner here, you have about 1 in 4 offspring that are going to be lowercase a, and those are going to be ones that are expressing albinism and obviously also carrying it if they're expressing it. And so Rosie is this. And we actually are kind of lucky with Rosie in that Rosie is one who was born in the wild and actually is pretty well documented what her history was before she was here, because we've had her since she was just like a day old. And so the woman who brought her into us was somebody who, you know, saw Rosie's mother laying the eggs and was like documenting the progress of the snapping turtle nest as like a thing she was doing with her kids over the summer. And then when they hatched and came out, she was able to say, okay, there's maybe 15 or so eggs in this clutch, and 3 of them were albinos like Rosie, which is a little less than 1 out of 4, but it's pretty close. You know, the math almost works out where, you know, about 1 in 4. And like I said, it's kind of a random dice roll, so it's not going to be exactly 1 out of 4 every time. And that's, like I said, about checks out. So you get the lowercase a there. And like I said, generally, if you are a snapping turtle that is expressing albinism, it's very unlikely that you're going to survive to adulthood. So what you end up seeing is that most of these don't survive, so they don't pass that on. And what that means is that there is fewer than, you know, a quarter of them out there. It's much less common than 1 out of 4 in the larger snapping turtle population to have albinism. But let's change something here. Let's pretend that Rosie's father was not a carrier for albinism. Let's say Rosie's mother was a carrier for albinism, but Rosie's father wasn't. Let's see what that does to our equation here. So we're going to give Rosie's father a capital P and a capital P. And what we see then is this one doesn't change. And we go from having a capital P, lowercase a here, to now we get a capital P, capital P. So it's another one that is expressing normal coloration, but isn't even a carrier. And then over here, we're getting a capital P and a lowercase a. And so now we don't have any turtles in this clutch that are actually expressing albinism. We have 2 carriers, so we have 2 that could pass albinism on to the next generation if they found another carrier and are bred with them. But none of the babies in this clutch would actually be albino like Rosie is. And that's, I said, that's illustrating how albinism is recessive. And there's a lot of traits like this. Blue eyes are something that is recessive to brown eyes, for example. Blonde hair is recessive to brown hair, for example. And like I said, you see this in a lot of traits that have kind of sort of binary-ish features. One of them will be expressed over the other one. But another kind of cool thing that we have here, genetically speaking, is a colony of walking sticks. And so we're gonna hop back here into a Punnett square, and let's clear all this out. So one of the things that is determined also by genetics is whether the offspring is male or female. And so with humans, usually the way you'll see that expressed is with X and Y chromosomes. And so, you agree now, I guess. So female parent, mother, is XX, male parent, XY. And what you end up seeing is in Punnett square, get XX, XY, XY. And so in this case, the 2 on the top would both be female children, and the 2 on the bottom would both be male children. But some animals are kind of interesting in that they're able to do what's called parthenogenesis. And walking sticks are a good example of this. And what parthenogenesis is you don't need two parents to make a baby. One parent can make a baby, specifically the females can make a baby. And so now we want to be thinking about, what does that do to our genetic mix here? What happens when just the mother is reproducing on her own? Let's get rid of this. And so what you end up seeing is basically the mother ends up passing on two of the same chromosomes. So, you're functionally acting like it's two parents. She's passing on two sets of chromosomes, even though she's only one individual. But she only has X and X. So when a walking stick uses parthenogenesis, and this is true for most things that use parthenogenesis, you can only produce female offspring because there's no Y to put into the mix to make a male. And walking sticks are kind of interesting in that they can do parthenogenesis, but they can also reproduce sexually as well. So male walking sticks do exist, but they can only be the product of a male and a female interbreeding with each other, which is not the main way that walking sticks reproduce. They mostly do this parthenogenesis thing. And so generally, like our colony of walking sticks doesn't have any males in it. So every walking stick we have is created by this means, which means all of them are female all the time. We've had our colony for about 3 years now, and there's never been a male in it, despite probably going through, at this stage, several hundred walking sticks have probably been born and lived their lives in here because they only live a few months. But this isn't necessarily the case for every sort of parthenogenic thing. A good example of something that actually does the opposite of this is bees. And so bees, when they're making a colony, you'll start with a queen, specifically. And this is true for bees, it's true for wasps. And the queens are able to similarly reproduce parthenogenically. But what's interesting with them is basically they only use one set of chromosomes. So what you would see is the queen bee produces 4 offspring that all only have one X, basically. And what you get with a single X chromosome in the case of bees is a male. And so the way that you have a distinction within bees is they don't have separate X and Y chromosomes, they just have one. Then she can produce females, but she doesn't do that very often. She more or less just hangs out on her own and reproduces and makes males to do the work. So, interesting thing that goes the opposite way. It's way more rare, it's way more common to do kind of what the walking sticks do. But every once in a while you'll get those kind of weird things that can go the opposite direction. And like I said, Punnett squares are something that are a very useful model for this, but it's not perfect for everything because they have a hard time accounting for things like, like I said, any trait that has more than 2 kind of potential expressions for it. They have a really hard time accounting for things like mutations. So, we talked about eyes briefly, where we said, brown eye, blue eye. There's not just 2 colors of eyes, there's a million different colors of eyes. There's a lot of variation even within a given color of eyes. And that stuff all ultimately comes down to genetics too, that are, a little bit more deeper, a little bit more complicated. But this is generally the model of genetic expression that you're gonna learn in school, and it does a pretty good job of, like I said, expressing it to the degree that is relevant for most people, but I think something that I always like to remind people whenever we're talking about sort of this type of, common high school thing is that a lot of the times the stuff you learn in schools are very simplified versions that maybe don't always 100% of the time tell the whole story. So if it is something that you're interested in, it's worthwhile to do some extra research on your own. Look it up, read about it. You'll end up being more educated on the subject and, like I said, learn a little bit more, be able to talk about it a little bit more and better. And we'll get a little look at her here quick. I kind of just turned her loose. And so the walking sticks are super cool as far as the way they reproduce, because they actually just kind of lay eggs all the time. So you'll see it happening sometimes where, not today, but sometimes I'll take a walking stick out for a demo like this, and by the time I'm done with the demo, there's eggs in the bottom of the carrier even. Because like I said, they'll lay 5-10 eggs every single day once they reach maturity. I think it's kind of neat. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you are interested in visiting us in person, we are currently open Friday, Saturday, Monday from 9:30 to 5, and Sunday from 1 to 5. Starting relatively soon here, so sometime in the first week of June, we're going to be extending those hours out to, we're going to be open 7 days a week here. And so once we get to that point, I think it's the first Friday in June, I think, is the day we determined to be the start of our 7-day-a-week schedule. And so at that point, every day except Sunday is going to be that 9:30 to 5 schedule, and then Sunday will stay as that 1 to 5 schedule. So got that to look forward to once the summer starts and kind of school groups start or quit filing in. Thank you to the Beltrami Electric Co-op for underwriting these live shows for us. We really appreciate it. Also, we are still in the running for the best museum in Minnesota that the Minneapolis Star-Tribune is running. So if you go to the Star-Tribune's website or you go to our website, we have a link for it there, so you can go vote for us. Like I say, cool to just be in the running, but winning would be very cool as well. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and hopefully we'll see you